Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Hiring Engineers in the Age of AI. Mihail, Naveed, you guys want to start maybe with a little intro?
I'm Mihail. I am based in Miami, previously San Francisco and Los Angeles, where basically most of the technical people are from. And currently I'm the CTO of Meridian. Have been in payments for a long time and in blockchains and in technology in general. And relatively new to being a leader in technology because I would say the last 5 years I've been hiring and managing people. So yeah, excited to have this chat. Mostly excited to learn from these two amazing or three amazing technical people. Uh, and yeah, I'll pass it to Naveed.
Thank you, Mihail. Um, I'm Naveed. I'm based out of San Francisco. I'm the head of engineering for Blitz, which is a gaming stats app and coaching app. I come from a gaming background, work at many gaming companies. I'm a gamer myself. Uh, Game hiring has always been slightly different from your regular software engineering hiring, so I do want to bring that context in here. But like Neil said, looking to learn from you guys and learn from your experiences. I'll pass it on to Julian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julian Ramirez. I'm a senior engineering manager over at Dropbox and been there for about 5 years, based in San Francisco. And basically, my experience has largely been centered over in mobile development, where I've been working on that since about 2011, I think it was. And I've got some great opportunities to work in like the art space, agriculture technology, SaaS, and all of that great stuff. And I've really been enjoying seeing AI changing the scene. I think a lot of people say, it's like the last great shift from like to cloud computing or with mobile computing. And I think it's been fun seeing we're kind of like past the first wave, it feels like, of AI crashing on the shores. And I've had an opportunity to see some of like the second wave of like the problems. And so I'm really looking forward to talking with you all about your experiences with it as well, and hopefully walk away with some good things to try for my groups as well.
Awesome. And last but maybe least, I'm Matt McClintock. I'm the host of our Tech Teams Today podcast. I actually started out as an engineer, then engineering leader, product leader, and then made the transition over to product marketing. So it looks like decent amount of folks have joined, so let's just get into it. I want to start with a rapid fire set of questions for all three of you. So, Julian, let's stick with you. How do you think the term full stack developer has evolved over the past couple of years?
That's fun because, like I mentioned earlier, like I come from a mobile background, and I think that often when we talk about full stack developers, mobile is never expected as part of it. But often I would argue that mobile is a full stack in and of itself. But that said, I think that AI has changed that definition by expanding it even further. And really, that now part of that stack is going to be how do I leverage AI tools? And maybe not quite yet to the degree of how do you create and support AI systems and pipelines and all of that good stuff. But certainly, how do you leverage it in your everyday and know where the strengths are, know where it's good today, where like this model is strong, but also knowing where is it weak and what are the right tools for your stack as well.
Naveed?
Yeah, that's very cool, and I 100% agree with Julian. I mean, I would say that the bar for full stack engineers has always been changing. And it started with, oh, it's a client engineer who can do backend work. And then, oh, now we have infrastructure as code, so you can now do DevOps work and SRE stuff. And then you go from there to, oh, no, you can now run, these additional things, for example, automations or deployments. So it's always has been changing. Plus new technologies, mobile came in, the framework changes, so you're always changing the bar and the goalpost for full stack engineers. The core idea is that one engineer can do everything that it needs to ship a product. That's the core idea. And definition now includes being able to use AI assisted tools. And if you can't do it, you're not going to be very productive. So that's what Julian was pointing out. So it is definitely including that uh, skill now, in my opinion.
Mihail?
Yeah, that's not a lot to add, but I would just add that it really depends on how your company is designed, because some companies focus on a, say, web app, and they have, no matter how complicated, they have one backend and one front end. In that sense, you need to be able to create a full feature, backend and front end, and maybe DevOps as well, because you don't have a infrastructure as code or something maybe simple. If it's startup, then it's definitely DevOps included. In our situation with the Meridian, because we are so multi product, and we have a lot of microservices, and we are very complicated payment orchestrators and stuff like that. I don't consider full stack to be able to understand all of that, but I do consider full stack to understand the front end and the service that is built for that front end. So there's always like a backend for front end, if you will. So both of those. And because our infrastructure is very complicated with Pulumi and stuff like that, I also don't expect the full stack to necessarily be an expert on that, but I expect everyone to be curious, to be poking around and asking questions. And if you want, you can figure, more out than needed. But at a minimum, a full feature needs to be able to be built by a full stack engineer, which is front end, back end, deploy, they all together nicely.
Yeah, for me, the part that stuck out was the mobile piece. For me, it was front end, back end, cloud, now LLMs. But yeah, mobile definitely is more and more, a part of that. Moving on to the next question. So, how would you guys say a standout hire has changed over the last couple years? We'll start with you, Mihail.
Standout hire. One of my biggest challenges with hiring is that I still listen to my gut feeling when hiring. And one of the problems when you hire like that is that you cannot give an answer to the candidate or to the recruiting company you're working with if it's a no, but you can't really know why it's a no. Sometimes it's a no because it's the gut feeling. And every time I ignore it, it's a no later, and then I regret it. So that's one of the things that I started realizing, that on top of everything I try to learn, the gut feeling is very important. As long as you are able to filter it out from other feelings and insecurities and other stuff, like the true gut feeling, you need to be able to tap into that. But nowadays, I do focus a lot on curiosity. I do care a lot about humbleness and cultural fit, because it seems like culture fit has been my biggest problems in hiring, period. No matter what other problems there exist, if the culture fit exists, the person is able to figure things out going from there. Of course, there are exceptions, but I would say these are the most important things. And of course, when it comes to AI, I've been struggling to find a task or a question or a way to interview candidates so that even if they do use AI, they cannot keep up with reading that AI and responding to me. So designing questions in a way to be able to also see how the candidate is using AI when I want to, and ask questions that AI cannot really help them, because questions are stuck, in a way, if that makes sense.
It does. Naveed, how about you?
It's funny, Mihail, because my gut feeling is normally wrong. So I I try to be very evidence driven, but to the question, I think in the past you might really like someone who really nailed like the technical question live, or someone who went um, really out on the take home question and did something that you were really impressed by. That's changed now. You can't do that because people just use ChatGPT to do the take home test, or coding. The barrier for coding is like much lower now because AI can code for you. Um, I do agree with Mel's point about curiosity. That's a big one for me. I try to see in their past work if they tried to go beyond what their responsibilities were, if they explored more things, if they tried to be innovative or do things that were not really normally their wheelhouse. So that's a big one. Of course, technical know-how is always important, but to Mihal's point, culture has been also a big driver. Um, Technical skill may be second now because a lot of technical challenges that we face in the past were about like, does this person knows how to do this? That is easier to do now. You can just ask these LLMs, you can find information much faster. So it's not about that, it's more about how they work in a team and how they, carry themselves, so to speak.
Julian, round it out for us.
Yeah.
Bring it on home.
Totally agree with both what you guys have said. I feel like I have a bobblehead on right now, but kind of like adding on that, I think humbleness, curiosity is really what makes a slam dunk candidate these days. Like someone who recognizes that they don't understand everything about the cutting edge because it's constantly changing, and where they're able to both like, own up to that, but also demonstrate how they are trying to experiment with things and talk about the experiments that worked well and the experiments that didn't work well. And knowing that that landscape really is constantly shifting with every new model that gets released. I read a great article that was talking about how, the models are shaped differently, and sometimes it will be great at one type of problem, but then the next version will not be as good at, and you have to really pay attention to it. And I think you have to try things that are, try things that will be wrong, and you have to be comfortable talking and sharing about where you were wrong or where something broke. And especially in an interview context, everyone, like you were saying, Naveed, like everyone has like their favorite question. And oftentimes it is like, tell me about something that went wrong. What did you learn from it? And the candidates are just like, nothing went wrong. That's no wrong. And so the ones
Not
where they are
possible.
then able to say, yeah, like, I did this, I learned from it. I think that's really good. The other thing is, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty all over the board. And so candidates that have an ability to demonstrate high agility and the ability to quickly reorient themselves as the needs of the business or the org change, I think that's a really great quality to have right now.
So it seems like, and not just from this call, but every conversation almost I've had with engineering leaders, this comes up. Curiosity, humility, adaptability. Those are sort of soft skills that are harder to identify in the interview process. So I guess my question is how do you guys look for that in new hires? And Julian, let's stick with you.
All right. Like I'd mentioned, like one of my favorite questions is just the straight up, like tell me about like time something went wrong, or and like how did you work on that? How did you resolve it? And it's like one of my favorite questions because I've had some candidates where everything was going right and like they were answering questions perfectly. And I was so excited about it. And then I asked that question and they're just like, nothing went wrong. And you're just like, I don't believe you. Like, or, like find an example where, you can speak to that. And sometimes there have been the candidates where otherwise they were great across the board, but not being able to identify how even a good project could have gone better, I feel like just demonstrates a lack of an ability to introspect or a lack of humility, or a lack of creativity. And so that really is something that I look for and something that I enjoy in the interview process.
Mihail?
Yeah, I like that question. I ask it a lot as well. It's one of my favorite type of questions. I usually start with explaining what Meridian is, and then the candidate goes a little bit over their experience, and then I ask, what do you like and what do you not like about this profession? And then they go into likes and not likes. And there's multiple ways, like Julia mentioned. They might say that nothing really, that they like everything, and then I'm like, okay, I don't believe you. And then they might, if they start going about that, not liking something, it's how they say it. If they say it in a way that like sometimes product people just annoy me, and then I'm like, okay, I can feel some immaturity or just not really trying to understand the other person's side of the situation. and things like that. I like to ask questions that are more negative in a way. I like what what has gone wrong, explain what you learn from it. I do that all the time. Or this other one, or I could just ask what usually annoys you. What's the thing that annoys you the most? That one is my favorite probably out of all of them, because you'll see right away it's gonna pop into their head and they're gonna get excited about it, or they're gonna get a little bit annoyed about it, and you can kind of sense where this is coming from, what it's going to. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's mostly it.
It does, especially the asking them what annoys them. Naveed, how about you?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I've never asked it, but I'm gonna take that now and start asking. I think that's fantastic. Um, for me, one of the things I do is I start with either a technical problem and see how they engage with it. It might be something they have not seen before, and then it's less about writing the code for a problem. It's more about how they explain it, how they interact with me while they are working through it, and that shows a lot. Another thing I do is where I start discussing the problem that I'm having right now and see the level of curiosity that's popping up from them on that. Like, are they jumping? Are they excited? Oh yeah, why don't we do this? Or are they sort of annoyed? Like, okay, well, okay, what does that has to do with this interview? And you can spot it very easily. And the candidates who are curious by nature, they will jump on it right away. They will be paying attention. They'll be like, ask for more details, and that's a cue for me to kind of keep going on the process.
So moving on to AI tooling. So we've spoken a little bit about this. How do you sort of keep your dev teams from lean? I think there's like a delicate balance, right, of leaning too much on AI tooling and using it just the right amount. What warning signs do you look for or sort of think about when trying to maintain that balance throughout your teams? Let's start with you, Naveed.
Okay. Yeah, definitely on our side, we're trying to lean heavily on, AI assisted coding. We have seen good results from it, and we want people to be using these tools to improve their performance, reduce time to deliver something, or just, break that innovation barrier where in the past people might say, I don't know about this code base, I don't know about this module or microservice, I have not dealt with it. So those things, we want to take away those things to the point of, let me just ask Claude, what is this project? How does this work? And then looking at that. So that's a good push that we are already sort of inculcating. Um, where I think the balance comes from is that at the end of the day, engineer is still responsible for the code, whether they wrote it or the AI wrote it. They're still responsible for making sure that it works in production. They're still responsible for making sure it's well written, maintained, and we can have something that we can live with for months and months, maybe years to come. So that's the thing I see for. Uh, One example could be that AI could definitely review your code now. So Copilot will give you a lot of feedback. Are you looking at that feedback as, everything that Copilot says is like the word of God and I have to do it, or I'm looking at it and criticizing myself to make things better. So that's something only, in my opinion, an experienced engineer can do, and it takes time to build that. So that's something I always look for. Like when we are talking about AI assisted coding, as a person who is using it, dealt with these kind of problems in the past, and how he is kind of using AI to boost their performance as compared to the, I don't have any idea, but I'm just dumping a lot of code, and that is always going to lead to problems, in my opinion.
Julian?
Totally agree with, like the engineers are responsible for their code at the end of the day. But definitely, I think a lot of us are still working on just getting engineers like the right tools, the right practices, the right space, the right processes to encourage more usage and help with the adoption of these kinds of tools. I think we had a fun incident with vibe coding, and I think it is of like how do we balance like super cutting edge going off and like creating a prototype that would have taken months to otherwise develop, which is awesome and amazing, but like did it with so many lines of code that it was near impossible to do a code review for it. And then as we dug into it, realizing that like, yeah, there was a lot of like boilerplate that wasn't necessary. It wasn't using our design system. It wasn't like, following our best practices and all of that. And so I think right now we're trying to be really mindful and over indexing on encouraging engineers to learn the habits to use these tools, because we, like as a company, are really investing. We believe that AI is going to get better and better over time, and the skills that we help our teams to create is going to pay off, like is going to pay the dividends. And so we definitely are willing to take that risk, and even knowing that right now it might take you more time to write some features than if you just do them yourself. But overall, like our belief in the future is that that calculus is going to work out in our favor. And right now it is a lot of like having to know that we're going to spend more time on code review potentially. Like if AI makes each engineer theoretically like twice as productive, that means they're going to have twice as many PRs, and like we're going to need to spend more time on that. And I think that was one of those like second order kind of problems that we were coming across now of like, oh, there's a lot more PRs. Like we're spending a lot more time reviewing this code because yes, like Copilot, like you said, Naveed, of like Copilot can review, but I think we all are kind of like, we don't want AI yet like writing the code and then reviewing its own code. So keeping the human in the loop and making the adjustments for your org with your expectations as you start to see these emergent problems.
Mihail?
Can I just echo one
Oh, yeah,
thing?
sure.
Um, which is very spot on, is like we are at the worst possible models right now. We're only going to get better from here. And that's what Julian pointed out, like, that we are starting up to see that. And I think like starting now on that like wave is the right thing to do, starting using them. These models will get very good. They will be so good that you will be like, maybe they're at a junior engineer level right now, but they will become a senior staff engineer level at some point. And I'm excited about that. So I think this is the right thing to do at the moment, but we will see more and more productivity coming out of it as we move forward.
The CPO at OpenAI even said these are the worst models that we'll ever use, in history right now. So yeah, totally right. Mihail?
That makes sense. Well, you guys already nailed pretty much everything. All I'll add is that what's important for me now is to add guardrails to make sure that we give the freedom to engineers to code how they want, to use AI in any way they want. But part of our culture is that, again, engineers are responsible for their code. So if one piece of code ends up with a lot of back and forth in a PR, the engineer will feel ashamed because they know that this is not okay. And we know that the PR review is not meant to catch your errors. It's meant to be the last resort, last step. Same with QA. QA is not meant to just take your dump of a code and test it. QA is meant to come and catch what you couldn't QA. So it's part of the culture, and everyone understands that. And I feel like we've been using AI very well. We use CodeRabbit as well, and Copilot, and the team just understands in general that they need to understand exactly what code they are releasing. And we have a very strong, I would say, rule around the size of a PR. PR needs to be very, very small, and they need to do one thing. So then it's very easy to see what you did. You can also review it yourself if AI did it for you. Sometimes they might do everything and it'll be great. So things like that, putting guardrails in place and setting everyone up for success with the processes that we create.
So double clicking into guardrails. I'm curious, Naveed, Julian, sort of how you approach that. So Julian, I know the story of the 4,000 line PR. Um, how do you approach preventing that from becoming a regular occurrence?
I think the
Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Mhm.
One of the major things was celebrating that, to be honest, because it was a huge effort again that like would have taken months for us to develop by hand. And one of the cool things about it was that it also let us really quickly iterate on the design of this new feature as well, because the AI was able to just like look around and be like, man, like this is probably what that interaction would look like. And that also saved our design partners a ton of time. And so like, well, yes, like some engineers in the org were just kind of like, whoa, like where did this come from? And like totally fair. Like we don't want to just be landing huge, like way too big PRs regularly. But again, I think especially while we're trying to encourage engineers to adopt these tools, it was like, at least for me personally, a lot of it was like celebrating the accomplishment of like what they did. But then walking it back a little bit and definitely being like, but we cannot launch this. Like maybe we can do a limited, user testing experience with this, but really trying to look at the class of errors that we have and then learn from that about like what are the ways to improve it. I mentioned earlier about how like the design system like hadn't gotten used. And I think some of this is about recognizing the current limitations of the models where like they are only kind of sort of able to look at our existing design library and understand like when it should be using those pieces. Over time, we believe it will get better at that. Um, but I think we've been really trying to come up with a common set of like um, config files that we can use, be it in Cursor or any of the other tools, and setting really clear expectations across the org of like, regardless of who wrote the code, if you're committing it, you're responsible for it, and really just like doubling down on what is expected and that like we right now we need humans involved for the review. AI tools may make that review process easier, but while a human is required to be in that loop, it needs to be reviewable by a human, which means it needs to be within a certain size.
Naveed, over to you.
So I'll give a different take on this. I think the way we are approaching it is very flexible based on the product. So, if we have multiple products, for example, there's a live product and a lot of users, we have to be a lot more careful. We can affect like millions of users if we do that. So the way it ties back into hiring is we need to find people who can be self-drivers, okay? And then give them flexibility. Like for a particular team, me and Robert in the Diner team, we use Copilot all the time to look at that code and ask questions about it, right? In other cases, we might not even have Copilot. We have like actual people do the review. So that's one thing I always encourage. The other thing is, as a startup, sometimes you are trying to move fast. Mark Riswick recently posted on LinkedIn that 75% of the company's code is vibe coded. And I totally understand it because they're trying to move extremely fast. They're trying to get to market very, very quickly. They're trying to work very closely with uh, the customer. They can afford to be, and they're a startup. They're not like have a large live audience. They can afford to be more aggressive around this, where AI wrote the code, they think it's working, and they can just ship it. So that's my recommendation for like adjusting your AI, I would say influence based on your needs and requirements. And like I said, going back to your hiring, find people who are self-drivers and can be owners. And you'll find that they will figure out the best way possible for the problem they're dealing with.
So shifting gears a little bit, and we'll get to vibe coding. I know all of you want to talk about it. So there's a real shift between the junior developers that are coming up nowadays that sort of probably started coding with tools like Copilot and Cursor and Windsurf, and sort of, at least probably I would say our generation, going out on a limb there, where I mean I started out with a blank IDE in Sublime, right? How do you see sort of, you know, the mentorship of these developers that are coming into the job market today that sort of grew up in a world where they had a co-pilot next to them, from day one, maybe writing code, versus developers who are probably a little further along in their career and started out, with a blank screen. Let's start with Mihail.
I'm biased because I've been an engineer for more than, I guess, close to 14 years. But I generally feel like it's much easier to have context and to have experience, of course. It's much easier to go and use AI to just understand the code, understand what it does, and just be able to quickly connect the dots. Because no matter how well AI is going to be able to explain to you, it takes time to learn new concepts. And if it's a new concept, it might take a while until you fully get it. And then engineers might be like, okay, I think I get it, but they don't fully get it. And we don't understand all the consequences. And that's usually the price that junior engineers pay for vibe coding.
Naveed.
I mean, I'd say I'm excited about the future, and a lot of these young programmers who are, coming off even from college with vibe coding, you probably all have seen the video of, a graduate showing his AI ChatGPT screen during graduation. It is the reality. No matter what we say, that is the reality. And there are certain challenges that we need to be aware in terms of the current generation of LLMs. For example, one problem is really long conversations don't hold very well. There's research on that, Apple has shown. So there are limitations to what's possible now, but I am very bullish on it. I think if we can think of LLMs as code generators have been around for a very long time. People have done code generation. You don't save the generated code. It's like a compiler, right? You save what you use to generate it. And that's, in a lot of cases, in my opinion, in the future is going to be the prompts. So you basically commit the prompts. And if you want to change, you go back and edit the prompt and then generate again. So that's the future I'm looking for. And what I feel that is that the new wave of engineers who are, you know, kind of starting up on vibe coding. There's a video with where like 5 years old were coding actual apps, but just typing in English, and I'm very excited about that future. I think that is going to be the future. So we will need to understand that better. We need to understand what happens when we get there. I'm scared and excited at the same time about that future where you don't really understand what's going on under the hood. But the model is there to help you understand it when you need it. Um, I definitely think a mixture of senior engineer and junior engineers will help solve those problems. Where there will be some issues where you did a bunch of vibe code and now you don't understand how it's working, and the model cannot help you, and you have now to deal with it. Uh, so it is a challenge, uh, and I don't think the solution is very imminent, but I'm excited about where it's leading to.
I would add
Julian, how about you? Yep.
very quickly, if we're talking about the future, because this is what I was replying to now. If we're talking about the future, I think in the future we'll have different, very interesting new types of positions. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've been thinking about stuff like, I don't know, like the guardian of the code, or like, the custodian of the code who uses AI agents that are designed in a way that basically you kind of do back and forth like a bounce, like, hey, I have this bug, and then it goes and debugs for you, and like, hey, do you think this is the problem? You're like, probably not because of this, and then it goes. It's like something that helps you to think very fast through the code. And in the future, most likely you won't need to be an engineer at all, because AI will be good enough with AI agents to be able to kind of go back and forth until we figure it out. And also the code maybe will transform from now it's code, in the future might be something like an organism, in a way that, like a genetic material, like a bio something that evolves, and you have to somehow with tools watch how it evolves. That probably will come to that at some point when AI starts to create more interesting types of module that you can build with. It's something I've been thinking about.
Very cool.
Very interesting. Very Skynet. Julian, over to you.
Yeah. You both have given me some great things to think about. I like this idea of the organism, and also of like saving the prompts, and like we would rerun those on the new models. I'm gonna be thinking about this tonight. I think one of the interesting things was when I had a chance to work with a newer PM. And oftentimes, like part of PM is like, writing a lot of documents, PRDs, fleshing those out, and all that stuff. And the way that he used AI was just wild. And he was just like, he was loving it. He came up with so much like high quality documentation and thought through the problems so well. And the way that he used it was not, like I sometimes have used AI of, like let me write something out and then have AI zhuzh it up. It was more of like he was actively collaborating with AI, with ChatGPT, of like asking questions. This is what I want to do. What about this competitor? What about that? And like growing it together in partnership. And that was really cool. Like he actually uses like ChatGPT so much he was able to ask it for coaching advice of like, what should I like do more in my career? And it was telling him like, you don't seem to be celebrating your wins enough. And I was like, how does it know that much about you? And I think in general, like that aligns with some things that like I've read. Kind of The Verge had an article about like AI and perfume, I think yesterday or the day before, that touched on this. And a good friend of mine, Erica Meat, has a blog that she wrote about AI as well, that I pulled a couple of these concepts from. But in Erica's blog, she talks about AI users as either like centaurs or cyborgs. And so the way and she got it from someone else. I apologize to the original author, but that like a centaur, there's like a clear line of like man and horse. And I think with a lot of the older, like more established engineers and stuff, like we often feel like this is the work that works well with AI and this is the work that I do myself, or like there is a clear handoff for it, versus cyborgs, which have a more integrated approach and are viewing the AI tools as the extension of themselves. And I am very excited as kind of like older generations and newer generations start meeting together, because I really hope that we'll learn how to more smoothly get like cyborg centaurs, and just, teaching them the parts of architecture that are still relevant and important, and learning how to work with like legacy code bases and what are the things to be concerned about, but then using AI to simplify and streamline a lot of those ongoing processes.
Yeah, I would just ask sort of for the present, not the future. Have you guys noticed, developers, particularly junior developers, that maybe have leaned too much on AI tools, and as a result of that, you notice maybe a lack of certain fundamental knowledge, and sort of how do you remedy that?
I just want to say we simply don't hire juniors nowadays, and I haven't actually worked with juniors for years. It just so happens that all the startups I've been working with does not hire juniors, which is a big problem, because my sister just graduated university, and I always was telling her that you're gonna find a job very easily because you're an engineer, especially you're a girl nowadays, much easier, because it's just the disbalance. And now she's struggling for almost a year to find a job.
Yeah, Julian?
I definitely think, yeah, it is a challenging market right now for newer developers, and it is a little ironic how optimistic we are about like AI enabling them to be productive, but also there is a lot more hiring happening on the senior side, and I think maybe that does reflect that while we're optimistic about the future, we don't yet feel it's there, and so like we still need the senior engineers to be doing a lot of this work. And so maybe that inflection point will come soon. Maybe it won't come. And I'm very curious to see how that plays out. As far as the original question as well, of like, have we seen some junior engineers get burned by relying on it too much? I think luckily our general like interview process has been able to make sure that, or maybe some candidates who use AI to pass the interviews have been able to continue to use it, and they just have the workflows where it's helped them from getting burned too much. But I think any of the cases of like someone over relying on it, we haven't yet seen enough of it yet to be a systemic concern.
But it's interesting though that someone who could pass the interview using AI, and if you're so good that you can keep your job after that using AI, what does that say about your
Yeah.
abilities and your resourcefulness, right? Naveed, how about you?
Yeah, to Mihail's friend, we there's definitely a sort of an issue that we don't hire juniors anymore. I have the same experience, but I do some coaching outside of work. So I have seen some of the younger programmers who have used vibe coding maybe a little too much and not understand the what goes on underneath. Um, I think a lot of that has to do with not asking the right questions, and that's actually true for any programmer. Junior engineers too, when they are vibe coding, they can actually take the time to ask the AI about the details, and it will provide really great details, sometimes better than a senior engineer will provide, because they might just hush them. Um, so I think that's sort of a cultural change that I would advocate for. That if you're using white coding, just go deeper. Ask why you did it like this. Question it. You can ask AI to criticize itself, and sometimes it actually changes its mind too, and that's totally normal. The goal is to not just produce something. The goal is to understand it at the same time.
So before we go all in on vibe coding, um, let's so I we Julian actually was at the event. Naveed, I think you were actually at Tech Teams today live in San Francisco, and one of our panelists asked or stated, I'm not really sure where senior engineers are going to come from in the future, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm curious what your take is on that. Naveed, let's stick with you.
The person who coined the term vibe coding, Andre Karpathy, he has a great video about, what's next for software. I highly recommend searching for it and going through it. But that is a great question, Matthew. I mean, we have to figure out where senior engineers going to come from. There are a lot of these deep challenges that need experience, and those, I would say, the battle scars that come from dealing with these problems. And if we are not going to have those, where will we go from there? And like I said, my recommendation has always been to dig deeper into whatever you're doing, and that will build those things. Um, I have another idea that I do propose for junior engineers, like my elder sister who's having trouble finding a job. This is the best time, probably in history, to be a solo entrepreneur. And we are actually seeing people use effectively agents and assistant to be a one-man shop. You might have run Base 44 is one example where a single person, sold an $80 million startup. But of course, they were senior engineers. They were a senior techie, knew the thing. But what I see in the future is that a lot of these guys will actually build apps and tools and games and ship them and deal with the problems, and that's how they're going to go to the level of seniority we are looking for in like an enterprise level. That's actually a good thing in my opinion. It also means we're going to see a lot of garbage come out in the world, but that's fine. In my opinion, in a free market economy, you will see good things pop up and come out from there. uh, that's my recommendation.
Mihail?
Been thinking about that for a while, and I think there's a couple of potential options. I'll talk about the optimistic ones. One option is that in the future there will most likely will find a way to introduce junior engineers as a different type of an employee, maybe working with these agents and maybe just being the human that interacts with the agents to do debugging while learning the code. That's one option if the code is simple. Another option would be you have agents that are so smart that they understand your code so well that you hire a junior engineer, and for 2 months, basically, that AI just teaches that engineer about the code practice, about everything. And it's like a boot camp, but it's your personalized boot camp. And you teach that engineer, and then you have different new types of contracts, and then you retain that engineer for longer and stuff like that. We'll find ways, but we are at a weird time for the world in general also, and for this sphere, because AI is taking over the jobs, but we didn't yet figure out what to do with the lack of jobs. So in the future, yes, there's all these options of the having the universal basic income and stuff like that, and maybe there will be different taxation, but it's this gap where everyone is figuring it out that's scary.
Julian.
Yeah. Plus one about UBI and like wondering about how that's going to change the financial landscape. Roy Bahat over at Bloomberg Beta does a lot of like writing on this, which I've found really good. I think as far as where senior engineers are going to come from, I think that's really going to depend on what is the shape of code bases in the future as well. And while there are a lot of like some very cool stories of like one engineer, building and launching products or like getting bought out and stuff like that. And then on the opposite end, we have these like enterprise legacy code bases entirely bespoke, written by hand. What is going to happen as those like AI written code bases grow and the companies around them grow? And like, what is that going to, and, kind of going back to Mihail's organism kind of setup. I think that senior engineers are probably going to be in new roles, and it's going to really depend on almost the legacy of that code base. Like if it is, and it might be a point of bifurcation. I doubt that, but I think that a senior engineer at a company is going to be very different if that was a 100% vibe coded code base versus if it is a, heavily handwritten code base. And I'm going to be very curious to see how, like, what is going to be the first vibe coded product that has like 100 engineers working on it. Like, is there going to be a complete, like I feel like the scoping of the work required for that is going to be potentially completely unpredictable. If you ask it to like change the text on a button, but then that ends up triggering like a cascade of reactions, and it ends up like rewriting the entire code base in like some new optimizations because maybe the model underneath it changed and that prompt was like a tipping point. So I'm fascinated to see where senior engineers come from, but maybe I'll give the least concrete answer of all of like, I think it's going to depend on how the code bases evolve and what the organizations around them look like.
I would quickly add that in the future, maybe it will change. What will change is because one of the biggest problems with AI now is context. It seems like AI is struggling with the context we give it, so the bigger projects they just choke. But maybe what will happen is we will learn to model and design our code in a way that we always consist of small pieces. And then one AI deals with one piece, has one job, has one outcome, one set of tests, and it just does that very well and vibe codes the hell out of it, And then there's multiple pieces that work in a modular way. That would be one way probably,
Maybe it's like the return of microservices and just like a highly modular architecture because that works well with the context windows of our tools. And then as context windows grows, we'll return to a monolith.
Full circle. So it looks like we can't avoid the topic of vibe coding, so let's just get into it. All right, so I think everybody knows what vibe coding is on this call. So developers are increasingly letting AI complete logic based more on vibes, hence the term, more so than planned out, thoughtful PRDs and intent. How are you guys seeing that show up in your teams? And maybe let's start with the pros before we get into the cons. So, Julian, let's stick with you.
Yeah. Vibe coding is fun. Like it has such a rapid feedback cycle, and you're able to move much closer, kind of like at the speed of thought. It feels like when, like dating myself, my turn of like, when Rails came out or Python and the admin console, you're just like, oh my gosh, I have like an admin console just with this already. And it feels like with vibe coding, you're able to very quickly iterate on the product. And I think that is excellent, especially when you need to it makes it easier to stay in the perspective of your user, of your customer. And you're able to quickly build something out, try it, see if it works, realize it doesn't, change it, and keep moving. I have been working on like a scale kind of tool, like a smart scale. And I hate writing C++, even though like I wrote tons of Objective-C. I hate C++. And it's basically 100% vibe coded little code base. Granted, it's like a 200 line, more like a script thing, Arduino thing, but it was really fun to collaborate with AI, writing the algorithm, have it spit out the script, and then just like upload it to the hardware, try it, realize like, oh no, that won't work at all, and like tweak some things, and just that feedback cycle being so tight. I think that's very fun about vibe coding, and hopefully will help us create just better products for our customers and our users.
Mihail, we'll stick with pros and then very swiftly switch to cons.
I think I got very lucky. I guess we're doing this startup at this time because we have mostly non-technical people on the team because our product is very complicated, mostly on the back end, not in terms of engineering, but in terms of operations and expansion. We have banking and we have legal. So there's a lot of non-technical people who do a lot of work that is not really, there's no ways, there no known ways to automate. And well, I'm a big fan of Retool, and I use Retool for most of our dashboards and workflows for simple stuff, especially for non-technical people. And because, for instance, you go to Retool, you can create a query, and you can also create all the resources and make them read-only. You put the guardrails in place, and then someone non-technical can come and create a graph, create whatever they need to quickly figure out something from the data. Or there's also workflows, and I have all the resources for sending emails, sending Slack notifications, stuff like that. And people can create automations by vibe coding each block. And that's exactly what vibe coding is very good at. A little piece of code. And they can just get this block, get the result, make sure it works, run it, see the result, put in GPT, go to the next block. This way they can create any automation they want without needing engineers. So this way, this has been a big blessing for us.
Naveed, pros,
So
and then we'll go through cons. We got
maybe I'll go with some positive and then I'll even start with some negatives and
All
then
right.
there. So I mean I would say like we have to understand what are the two most biggest like massive unlocks vibe coding is providing us, right? So one is, time to ship. Just the output of an engineer is increased, many folds. You can get things done faster, if you're still typing one by one as compared to just, asking Copilot to fill the, structure and then complete that, that's like 100 times faster. And the second is, I would say, the innovation block, right? So innovation block I explain as somewhere you don't know something, you haven't done something, or you don't know the code base that you're dealing with. And then you're using these tools to understand it better and then making changes to it. Something that was very hard to do in the past. People will just like, I don't know this, I can't do, you have to talk to, Julian over there to the, I'm not going to touch it. So that is another massive unblock. We should be 100% using it. In fact, my thinking is if an engineer is not using these tools, then they'll have to talk to me. Like, why are you not doing it? You're leaving so much on the table, right? So definitely these two massive unlocks are there, and we should 100% be bullish around them and use them. I would say they're not without challenge though. Like none of us who are seeing these tools are saying that, oh, they're perfect. There's a lot of code being written that no one knows about, and that scares me. Um, there are security issues, there are compliance issues, there are coding standard issues, and a lot of that hasn't been solved yet. Uh, so the solution to that for a lot of people would be to just stay away from it, and I don't think that's the right approach. One example I often give is, when in farming, in agriculture, when before tractors and harvesters were invented, the whole village will come together to harvest your field. There will be food, there will be dances, there will be music, right? When harvester were invented, a single person can harvest the entire village's crop. So you missed out on that community event, but you're a million times more productive. So what an village should be thinking in that sense, like, okay, we need to be productive, but we missed out on that. We need to find other ways to do those things that we were doing earlier, right? I would apply the same logic to vibe coding. We definitely need to be more productive and create these massive unlocks, but we need to be very aware of the challenges. For example, security is a common one, and I've seen people vibe code commit API keys into a repo myself. And that's a real challenge. So we should be always thinking about then maintainability. How does it work with the rest of the environment? The LLM may not understand it. So that's still our responsibility. And we have all touched on it, and that's a risk we need to take care of.
Anything else, Mihail, Julian, you want to add before we go to the last question? We're coming up on time here.
I'll just quickly add that guardrails again. You just put all the scripts in place before the PR actually has, or ideally local scripts to scan for keys and stuff like that. But one big con for me has been the C-suite bombarding me with all these clickbait articles. Look, this new tool that can replace all your engineers, and they're like, should we replace engineers? I'm like, no. So that's the biggest con.
Julian, anything you want to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Nothing to add. All right. So last question. So rapid fire round. Let's think about the future. So 12 to 18 months from now, what AI related skill or mindset will every top engineering leader have adopted or should adopt? Let's start with you, Julian. You look like you're in deep thought.
I'm trying to figure out what. I would like to say something of like they should just be experimenting with AI use cases every day, and they should be pushing themselves to use AI in cases where they're currently sinking a lot of time, wherever they're frustrated, wherever they are like draining their energy, try and like offload that work to AI. And even if it doesn't work one time, like even if it doesn't work literally today, in 12 months, you should try it again because you will be most likely surprised by what the models are able to do. And so I think it's really just continue to be curious, continue to try using the new tools for new things, and to revisit past problems where it might not have been yet ready and apply it again.
That's a valid point, actually, because if you were coding with LLMs 2 years ago, it's night and day compared to today. So
Totally.
definitely valid. Mihail?
I'll just say that if you say use one particular tool like a shovel and you learn a technique, then you're gonna get good at it and you know how to use a shovel. And then if somebody else gives you a different tool, completely different tool, you cannot use the same technique. And I think what's happening with AI now is that we have a lot of very good techniques that we learned in the decades about how technology should be done and processes. And now we have AI and we're trying to stick it in the same techniques. What I think engineering leaders should be is challenge assumptions as much as possible.
Naveed? Bring it on home. This is it.
I mean, I would say if we just do a quick back of the napkin math, right, together, we have a little over 4 million developers in the US, and we are still one of the leading, software producers in the world. Imagine that if we can, if Mark Riswick can be 4 times more productive with vibe coding. Imagine that's like like a North Star for now. Maybe eventually it'll be even higher, but for now, if all of us can be even twice as much productive, that's a lot more we can achieve together, right? There's a lot more we can do, a lot more new products we can ship, a lot more we can reduce the cycle for our, from using a gaming term, it takes 6 months to build a DLC, maybe it takes 1 month now, right? So imagine what we can do with all of that. But then also imagine when all of this stuff is out and then all of these new apps and tools and out in the world, we are 100 times more PRs to review, like Julian said, how we deal with those challenges. So we need to think about both of them, both of the sides together. And our hiring should reflect that. Hiring should be looking for both of these things when we are hiring.
Well, I want to thank our panelists and all our attendees, Naveed, Mihail, Julian. Really appreciate the talk. Wow, we probably should have retitled the webinar and included the term vibe coding in it. But really great conversation for all the attendees. We'll be sending a video of the recording to everybody. And we actually do webinars probably like every 4 weeks, always with engineering leaders for engineering leaders. And if that's not enough for you, We do have a podcast, Tech Teams Today. So feel free to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we drop weekly episodes with engineering leaders. Julian's been on the show, and Mihail and Naveed will be on the show soon. So thank you everyone for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great conversation.